Wes Calder didn't flinch when the bartender dropped the bottle. The glass shattered just inches from his boots. But he didn't blink, didn't move, didn't stop watching the door. His right hand stayed loose near his hip, where the iron waited. The saloon crowd froze like animals scenting weather. Somewhere behind him, someone muttered, "That's him." Wes didn't look back. He could feel the weight of the eyes on him, same as always. Miners, gamblers, and ranch drifters with opinions they weren't bold enough to say aloud. He hadn't come for them. He hadn't come to Helena to die either. But the odds weren't great. The man in the doorway stood tall, shoulders squared under a riding coat, so knew the dust hadn't settled in yet. But it was her that made the room change temperature. She stepped in behind him, not touching, not needing to. The woman moved like she didn't care who watched her, and when the man peeled off and let the door swing shut, she was the only thing left standing in the frame. Black riding skirt, boots with actual polish, and a waistcoat cinched over a blouse too clean for cattle country. Her hair was dark and tightly braided. No hat, no jewelry. She carried nothing in her hands. But the look she gave Wes had the weight of a drawn pistol. Was Calder. The voice was crisp, not loud, but it carved through the stale air like a blade. He didn't answer right away. He let his eyes slide past her to the man still hovering by the entrance, tall, pale, clean, fingered, lawyer or bank type, nervous. Wes looked back at her. Depends who's askin'. Josephine Blackwell. He waited for the name to mean something. It did. Blackwell, as in Edwin Blackwell, as in Readable Ranch, 15,000 acres east of the river and half the water rights between here and Wolf Creek. Shouldn't you be crying at a funeral? He said flatly. Her jaw ticked. Burial's done. Paperwork's next. She stepped closer. The murmur in the room dipped. Wes let his thumb brush the edge of his belt buckle. Just once. A signal without meaning to be one. Her boots stopped 3 feet from his. "I need your help," she said. "It's not a bounty." "Good," he said. "I'm not taking work. I'm not offering a job." She paused. "I'm offering a contract. 1 year. Marriage." The bottle stopped halfway to the bartender's shelf. Dice froze mid-roll. Even the piano coughed into silence. Wes blinked once. Just once. "You're out of your damn mind." "No." She didn't smile. "I'm out of time." He didn't move. The weight in his shoulders didn't shift, but the air changed around him. And she saw it. She pressed on. "My father's will was clear. I have to be married by sunrise tomorrow or the ranch defaults to my uncle. He's got lawyers camped outside probate court. If I'm not legally wed by morning, they take everything." "You don't look desperate enough to lie." "I'm not lying. I'm negotiating." He looked at her, really looked. The hollowness around her eyes didn't come from sleepless nights. It came from trying to stay awake in a world that wanted you gone. "You know what I am. Everything about you makes people stop breathing when you walk into a room. That's what I need. You don't know what I cost." She stepped closer. Her coat brushed his sleeve. $5,000. Wes exhaled slow. $5,000. That wasn't a contract. That was a key. A way back onto a trail that had gone cold, she said. "You get the money the minute we sign. The rest after a year. You leave whenever you want after that. No questions. No contact." Clean cut. Wes didn't look at her. He looked at the bar mirror. Watched the crowd not watch him. He studied the face in the glass, the scar above his brow, the crease that had turned permanent beside his left eye. A killer's face, a man people hired to end problems, not inherit them. "And still," he said. "Why me?" "Because you scare people, Calder. Because no one will ask questions when I walk into that courthouse with you." He glanced back at the man by the door. "You bring a witness." She shook her head. "He's from the bank. I need you there tomorrow. After we sign, we meet with the board. My uncle will be present. You think I'll keep him quiet? I think you'll keep him cautious." Wes rolled his neck, his back popped. He hadn't slept in a bed in 4 weeks, hadn't gone 2 days without looking over his shoulder in 7 years. "I don't play house," he said. "You won't have to," she replied. "Just stand beside me. 1 year. That's all." He closed his eyes for half a second, and saw it again. Blood across the floor, a broken rifle, a voice calling his name that stopped halfway through. Wes opened his eyes, half up front. he said. Don't. He stood. The whole saloon shifted with him. Josephine didn't blink. You got papers ready. Judge Tallow will marry us at first light. He's flexible. And the rest? You'll ride out with me to Rideal. You'll be Mr. Blackwell by breakfast. No, was said. I won't. She lifted a brow. I don't take names, he said. We sign with Calder, or we don't sign at all. A flicker passed over her face. Then she nodded once. Mr. Calder it is. They were 5 steps from the door when he stopped. You tell me why you're doing this, he said. Not what's in the will. I want to know why you're standing in this saloon asking for a killer. She didn't hesitate. Because I'd rather live with a man like you than watch one more suit steal my mother's land. She left first, was followed. As he passed the threshold, the bartender called after him, You marryin' that girl for real? Wes didn't stop, only for a year. The door slammed behind him, and somewhere across town, a man unlocked the courthouse side door and laid out 2 sets of marriage forms. One clean, one already signed. The courthouse smelled like dust and ink and tired paper. Wes Calder stood in front of Judge Tallow's desk with his shoulders squared and hands loose at his sides. The collar of his shirt itched. Freshly scrubbed skin not used to being this clean. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, catching flecks of dust in the air like ash from a fire that hadn't gone out yet. Josephine Blackwell stood beside him, still in riding boots but wearing a dress this time. Dark green, simple, fitted like armor. Her hair was braided tight, jaw set tighter. Her fingers didn't tremble, not even when the judge asked her to confirm her full legal name, Josephine May Blackwell. She said, clear and calm. Wes said nothing until asked. Wesley Calder. His voice cracked the stillness in the room like a match. Judge Tallow sighed through his nose and adjusted his spectacles. This is irregular. You've said that twice already? Josie replied. It'll be irregular 3 times more before I'm comfortable. The judge muttered. He tapped the marriage ledger on the desk with a fountain pen, glancing from her to Wes. Your father intended for you to marry a man of standing. Not He hesitated, eyes sliding to Wes's face. Not a traveling gunman. Josie's spine didn't move. My father intended to box me in until I suffocated. We're here to meet the letter of his will, not his ghost's preferences. The judge looked at her for a long moment, then turned to Wes. You sure about this, son? Wes didn't answer with words. He looked at Josie. Her eyes met his without flinching. They were the color of pine shadows and high mountain creeks. She hadn't begged, hadn't blinked, hadn't lied. It was a business deal, but it wasn't dishonest. And Wes Calder didn't lie to himself. Not anymore. He nodded once. The judge grunted and picked up his pen. The ceremony took 6 minutes. They signed where they were told. No witnesses, but the clerk and an elderly janitor brought in from the hallway. Judge Tallow didn't ask Wes to kiss his bride, and Wes didn't offer. When it was done, Josie took the signed papers like a gunslinger collecting a bounty slip. She looked at the clock on the wall and said, We have 1 hour. The bank meeting is at noon. Good luck. The judge muttered as they left. You'll need it. They walked out into a Helena morning that felt colder than it should have been for June. Wind off the high peaks cut between the buildings like it knew something they didn't. They didn't speak until they were halfway to the Silver Banner Bank. Josie handed him an envelope without looking. Your first half. Was weighted in his hand heavy. Real. You trust me to show up now. I trust you understand contracts. They stopped outside the double doors of the bank. The building was limestone and arrogance, with brass handles and a polished step that had never once felt cow manure. You play silent and dangerous, Josie said. Don't speak unless I give you a reason. Don't smirk. Don't flinch. Just stand beside me like you've killed men for less than interrupting you. I have. Then this should come naturally. She reached out and brushed dust from his shoulder. Her fingers lingered just a moment too long. Then she turned and opened the doors. The Silver Banner boardroom smelled like cigars and distrust. 4 men sat behind a long table stacked with ledgers and contracts. They rose when Josie entered. They hesitated when they saw Wes behind her. Gentlemen, she said smoothly. This is my husband, Mr. Calder. He'll be joining me for all business matters moving forward. The eldest banker, Morton Hayes, cleared his throat. Mrs. Blackwell. Mrs. Calder, she corrected. Hayes swallowed, of course. Congratulations on your nuptials. She didn't thank him. She sat. Was stood behind her chair, hands folded, face like carved granite. He didn't blink, didn't look at the men, just was. And that was enough. The meeting started like a polite knife fight. Terms, extensions, interest rates, performance evaluations, asset declarations. Josie moved through it like a seasoned rancher at auction, blocking cuts, dodging traps, naming figures from memory. She caught every clause they tried to bury in double language, every pause between phrases where a man thought he'd gotten one over on her. They hated it. Every time one leaned forward, was shifted slightly, hand brushing his coat, just enough to remind them it might hold something more than fabric. They flinched every time. An hour passed. Then 2. Hayes wiped sweat from his brow with a handkerchief that looked older than the state of Montana. Finally, he pushed a signed extension across the table. I believe we have an agreement, he said. Josie smiled. Barely, we do. The other men gathered their papers in silence and left in a hurry. Hayes lingered. I must admit, Mrs. Calder, he said, your father would be proud. You've held Redial together with more spine than most men in this territory. Josie's eyes didn't soften. My father taught me to trust contracts over compliments, Mr. Hayes. Hayes nodded and left. Silence settled. Josie let out a long breath and sagged slightly in her chair. That went better than I thought. Was poured water from the pitcher on the table. You didn't need me. I needed you to be seen. She looked up. You existing in that room was enough. They didn't push because they thought you'd push back harder. You're welcome. She laughed once. Dry, surprised. Almost a real sound. Then she stood. We stay in town tonight, she said. Ride for Redial in the morning. I've booked 2 rooms at the Dry Creek Inn. Appearances. Of course. He followed her out. They walked in silence at the hotel. The clerk handed over keys without comment. Josie turned at the stairs. Breakfast at dawn. We leave by first light. Wiz nodded. She paused. I meant what I said in there. She added. About you being enough just by standing there. Wiz looked at her, unreadable. Then he said low and flat. You've just declared war on a man who doesn't lose. Josie held his eyes. Then I married the only man in this town who knows how to fight one. She turned and climbed the stairs. Wiz watched her go, then turned to the clerk. Room 12. Yes, sir. He took the key, pocketed it behind him. A man at the hearth folded his newspaper and stood. Didn't speak, didn't smile, just followed Wes upstairs, 1 pace behind. Wes didn't hear him, not yet, but he would. The trail to Redial wound through high country scrub and pine, cutting across ridgelines like someone had stitched it into the land with wire and sweat. Wes rode a bay gelding borrowed from Josie's stable, a horse with a smart mouth and better judgment than most men. Josie rode ahead, her coat flaring behind her like a banner in the wind, hat low against the morning glare. They'd left Helena at first light without speaking much. The tension between them wasn't anger. It was something quieter, heavier, like 2 people walking side by side who both knew they were heading toward a place neither could turn back from. By midday, they'd reached the pass. From there, Redial spread out below them like a claim staked in blood and stone. The main house was visible first, 3 stories of timber and stone, its windows glinting hard in the sun, barns, bunkhouses, corrals, fences stretching out in all directions like ribs. Josie slowed at the ridge. This is it. Wiz didn't answer. He just looked. She nudged her horse down the slope. Try not to shoot anyone in the first hour. Only if they shoot first, he said. They rode through the front gate to a slow beat of hooves and silence. Ranch hands emerged from buildings, one by one, stopping whatever they were doing to watch. Some leaned on fence rails, others stood with arms crossed. A few had rifles slung across their backs. Not pointed, but not casual either. Wiz counted them as they rode. 15 men, 1 woman older, flour-dusted apron and steel in her stance. A cook, probably not hired help, a fixture. Josie dismounted without help. Afternoon, she said, loud enough to carry. The group didn't respond, not at first. Then a man in his 50s stepped forward, broad-shouldered, weathered, gray in his beard. 4 men, Mom, he said with a nod. Heard you went to Helena for banking business. Didn't expect you to bring back a husband. Plans changed, Jack. The foreman's eyes slid to Wiz. This him? Wes didn't move. Josie nodded. Wes called her. He'll be handling security operations starting today. You'll report to him on anything outside the fence lines. Another hand spoke up. Younger, blonde, reckless face. You sure about this, Miss Josie? Man like that. He gestured at Wes's coat, the worn revolver at his side, the blood-colored dust still clinging to his boots. Has not exactly ranch material. You questioning my judgment, Tommy? The kid blinked. No, ma'am. Just concerned is all. Josie softened a hair. Concerns noted. But I've made my choice. Give him a fair chance. That's all I ask. The older woman with the apron stepped forward. You eaten? She asked Wes directly. No, ma'am. Dinner's in 30. Don't be late. And don't track dirt through my kitchen. She turned and vanished into the main house. The conversation ended with her. The hands dispersed slowly, casting backward glances. Wes felt them in his shoulder blades. He didn't flinch. Jack lingered. We'll talk security after supper, he told Josie. Tomorrow. She replied. Everyone rests tonight. He nodded and left. Josie looked at Wes. Come on. I'll show you the house. They walked up the steps. The porch was wide, wood groaning under their boots. Josie opened the front door and motioned him inside. The house smelled like cedar, wax, and old paper. Not cold, not warm either. She said, End of the hall. Mine's across. Appearances, remember. Wes nodded. She handed him a key. There's a lock on your side. Use it if you want. He took the key but didn't answer. She hesitated. They'll need to see us together. Not affectionate, but consistent. You understand. I know how to play a part, he said. Josie opened her mouth like she wanted to say something else. But then, a scream. It came from outside. Not a human scream, cattle. Wes was down the steps before she moved. The sound came again, sharp, cut off, followed by hooves pounding into dust. They reached the northern pen in under a minute. 3 hands were already there, rifles up, but not firing. Wes vaulted the fence. What was left of 2 calves lay crumpled by the wire. Bellies ripped open, hides flayed back. Blood pooled in the dirt. Too dark, too much. Josie stepped up beside him, breath short. What the hell? Wes crouched. The cuts weren't clumsied. They were clean, measured. This wasn't a coyote, he said. Jack arrived at a run, shotgun in hand. What happened? Someone opened the fence, Wes said, pointing to where the wire had been snipped and laid back carefully. Drove them through. Then, this. Josie stared down at the calves, her fists clenched. No, Wes said. It's a message. Jack scanned the perimeter. You think it was Jasper? Maybe. Wes stood slowly, but whoever did this knew what they were doing. No tracks, no noise. Just this. The cook, Mrs. Landry, arrived behind them. She didn't ask questions. She looked once, then turned to Josie. I'll keep dinner warm. You take your time. Then she left. Jack swore under his breath. It's not about the calves, is it? Wes shook his head. They could have taken 20 head and no one would have known until morning. This is about fear. Josie didn't speak. She knelt slowly, reaching out to touch one of the hides. Her hand stopped an inch above the torn flesh. Then she pulled it back. I want this cleaned up, she said. Burned, buried. Quiet. Yes, ma'am. Jack said. She looked at Wes. What do we do next? We watch the fence lines, he said. All of them. And if they come back. Wes didn't hesitate. Then we leave a message of our own. They stood there another moment, the blood soaking into their boots, the sun sinking red behind the peaks. Finally, Josie turned and walked back toward the house. Wes followed slower, and behind them, on the inside of the split fence post, carved into the wood in jagged lines, was a single word, Blackwell. You sure about this, Miss Josie? Man like that. By dawn, Wes was already on the north line. The wind cut sharp off the ridge, dry and fast, stirring dust through the sage and rattling the high barbed wire. He crouched near the split post where they'd found the calves and ran his fingers along the carved name again, Blackwell. The edges were still rough, fresh, done by knife, not spur or tool. He rose slowly and walked the perimeter on foot. Have to check for new breaches, have to let whoever was watching know he was out here now. The fence stretched across open country, curving with the land's natural slope. No fresh tracks this time, no blood, no signs of a second message, but the stillness had changed. There was tension in the air that didn't belong to nature. Behind him, hoofbeats, slow, deliberate. He turned as Jack rode up and dismounted. "We've been here 5 years," the foreman said. "I never once had a calf gutted like that." "Because it was never about the calf," was replied. Jack nodded grimly. "You think it's cord?" Wiz looked back out over the ridge. "I think it's someone who knows how to send a warning and not get caught." "That doesn't narrow it down much." Jack spat. "Hell of a way to welcome you to the ranch. I've had worse." He started walking again. Jack followed. "You believe Jasper's got the guts for this?" Wiz shook his head. "Jasper pays others to get their hands dirty. This was someone who's been close to blood before." Jack rubbed his beard. "We keep patrols going, night and day. Small teams. 2 men per line, rotating every 6 hours. Jack didn't argue. "I'll make the rounds." Back at the house, Josie sat at the dining table, the ledger open in front of her. Her coffee had gone cold. She didn't touch it. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the mantel clock and the occasional snap from the kitchen stove. She hadn't slept. Wiz could see it in her shoulders, the way her fingers tapped the page without realizing it. "You should rest," he said from the doorway. She didn't look up. "There's a payment due next month we can't make." "We bought time in Helena." She finally glanced at him. "We bought perception. The numbers haven't changed." Wiz stepped closer, nodding toward the page. "You think Jasper knows?" She snorted softly. "He doesn't have to. All he has to do is wait." He looked down at the columns of numbers. One line was circled twice in red. She caught his eye and said, "That's the irrigation bill. If we can't pay it, they shut the canals. No water, no pasture, no cattle. When? 30 days. He leaned back. "So we've got a month to stop whoever's cutting your fences and find cash you don't have." "Welcome to Redeal," she said, dry outside. Boots hit the porch hard and fast. Clara Boone burst through the front door without knocking. Her hair was windblown, cheeks flushed from riding. "They broke into the schoolhouse," she said without preamble. Josie stood. "When?" "Sometime after dark. I found it this morning." Wiz was already moving. "Anyone hurt?" "No. Nothing taken, just." She hesitated. "They left the map case open. My land charts are gone." Josie swore under her breath. "They're building a profile." "Off what?" "Off every vulnerable stretch between Redeal and the river." Wiz said. "They're looking for entry points. Pressure lines." Josie turned to Clara. "Anyone see anything?" Clara shook her head. "Not a soul." Wiz narrowed his eyes. "Then someone's helping them. Or watching for them." Back at the schoolhouse, the damage was subtle. A pry mark on the window frame, footprints, partially brushed away. The map case had been opened with care. Not ransacked, just inspected, was crouched by the fireplace. They knew what they wanted, didn't touch anything else. Josie walked slowly around the room, absorbing it. Clara stood near the door, arms folded tight. "I thought teaching letters was safer than this." She muttered. "You thought wrong." Josie replied, "You're a landowner now. You're part of the fight, whether you like it or not." Wiz stood. "They'll be back." Clara's voice was tight. "To my schoolhouse." "No," Wiz said. "To Redeal." They rode back in silence. The road felt narrower now, the trees taller. When they reached the house, Josie went straight to her father's office. She unlocked the desk drawers, flipped through ledgers, contracts, land surveys. Then she paused. Wiz leaned in. "What?" This page was sealed. She held up a folded sheet tucked inside a ledger's back flap. She opened it. The paper was lined in neat, mechanical handwriting, her father's. It wasn't part of any ledger, just a list, names, parcel numbers, deed values, and beside one line, a notation in darker ink: pending transfer, North Range, JB contact. Wes's jaw clenched. JB. "Jasper Blackwell," she whispered. They looked at each other. Josie's voice dropped. "He's already selling parts of Redeal." "You said he couldn't until you forfeited the will." "He must have found a way around it." She scanned the page again. "Some of these parcels. Hell, some are already registered under holding companies." Wes's face was like stone. "His selling land that doesn't belong to him." Josie folded the page carefully. slid it into her coat. Then we show the board. This is fraud. No, was said. This is leverage. Before she could answer, a horse galloped up hard and fast. Jack burst through the door. You better come outside. They followed him to the edge of the southern fence line. 3 more calves lay gutted in a pattern. This time, not near the wire, right in the open. The message had escalated. But that wasn't the worst of it. Wiz walked to the edge of the southernmost post, crouched, and ran his fingers over a new carving. Not a name this time. A symbol. A spiral cut into the wood, over and over until the grain blood. Josie saw it and stepped back. That was Cord's mark. She said, he used it when he ran with Thorne's outfit. It meant. Her voice trailed off. It meant someone was being watched. Was finished. They stared at the symbol. The wind died around them. Josie swallowed. So he is involved. Was stood slowly. Then your uncle just hired the man who murdered your family. The Redall community supper was held in the old church hall at the edge of town, the one with peeled white paint and a bell that hadn't rung in years. Josie hadn't planned on attending, but after the second attack, after the ledger and the spiral on the fence post, she knew staying home would signal weakness, and weakness. Out here invited teeth. She wore black, not for mourning, but for armor, a crisp blouse tucked into a narrow skirt, gloves to the wrist, boots polished like Cort. Wiz rode beside her in a dark coat with the collar up, the revolver visible under his left arm. No attempt at subtlety. The hall was already packed when they arrived. Ranchers, shopkeepers, laborers' wives, laughter swirled with the scent of roasted meat and sweet bread. A fiddle sawed its way through a tune no one really danced to anymore. Eyes turned as soon as they stepped through the door. They didn't stare at her. Not first. They stared at him. Was Calder. The man no one had invited but everyone had heard about. The one with the flat eyes and the gun that sat like a dare on his hip. The one who'd married the Blackwell girl overnight and hadn't smiled since. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The silence around their entrance said enough. Clara met them near the food tables, a glass of punch in her hand. You sure this is wise? She asked under her breath. Josie didn't slow. They'd talk if we came. They'd talk worse if we didn't. Clara glanced at Wes. Well, you brought the weather. Josie almost smiled. That's the point. They made their way through the crowd. Josie nodded at familiar faces, was kept to her side like a shadow with a heartbeat. They reached the long tables, set up family style. Josie sat. Was took the chair beside her, turned slightly so he could watch both the room and the door. Across the table, a banker's wife leaned in. So, she said brightly, you're the new Mr. Blackwell. Josie didn't flinch. It's Calder. Oh, but I thought. We married under his name. The woman smiled thinly. Well, that's modern. Wiz didn't answer. He picked up his fork and cut a piece of roast. You're quite the mystery, Mr. Calder. The woman continued. Where did you come from? Nowhere, polite. He said. The woman blinked. Someone down the table snorted. Josie leaned back, letting it hang. The woman turned to whisper to her neighbor. Whispers bloomed like fungus through the room. Across from them, Tommy, the same hand who'd questioned Wes on their arrival, raised a glass to the newlyweds. He called out, loud enough to cut the chatter. May the year pass quick. Laughter rippled, uneasy. Wes didn't move. Josie lifted her glass without smiling. To the things worth waiting for. They ate in silence after that. But the real moment came later, when the band struck up something slow and sad, and couples began to drift toward the floor. Josie stood first. We should be seen, she said. Wiz didn't move. She offered her hand. He looked at it, then he stood. They moved onto the floor like two wolves in borrowed clothes. He held her with exactly the right distance. Just enough pressure. She followed, just barely, because she knew he'd lead whether she did or not. Their boots moved slow across the worn boards, and the room watched. You hate this, she said under her breath. I don't dance. You are now. Only for a minute. The music wound through the rafters. She was suddenly aware of the space between them, how thin it felt, how deliberate. This town doesn't believe us? She said. I don't care what they believe. Well, I do. He looked at her then. Really looked. Why? Because tomorrow we face a man who feeds off doubt. If this town doubts me, he wins. Wes nodded once, then, so no one could see, he shifted his hand and pulled her just half an inch closer. It was nothing, it was everything after the dance. They walked out into the night without a word. The wind was cold again. The stars had that brittle, endless look that only came in dry country. Back at the ranch, Josie didn't go straight to bed. She sat on the porch instead, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she didn't drink. Wes stood at the rail. "You don't sleep," he said. She didn't deny it. "You afraid?" She didn't answer. He turned. "They're coming for your name, your land, and your blood." She looked up. "I know. Then get some rest." She looked away. "Do you?" "No." Long silence. "I used to be able to," she said quietly, "before my father died. Before it all turned to smoke." Wes didn't speak. She glanced at him. "What did you used to be able to do?" He didn't look at her. "Trust anyone with my back." More silence. Then she said, "What happens if we lose?" He finally looked down at her. "You survive. That's what happens." She nodded once, stood, went inside. He stayed. She didn't see the figure slip through the north pasture an hour later. But he did, too, at dawn. The ranch was already moving. Jack had doubled the watch rotations. Clara had sent word from the school. No sign of new tampering, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. Josie sat at the dining table, fingers wrapped around another cold cup. Wes stood by the window, watching the edge of the tree line. A knock came. Mrs. Landry answered. "Telegram for Mrs. Calder." Josie took the slip of paper, read it once, then she read it again. She stood slowly. "He hired someone." Wes turned. "Who?" She handed him the paper. It was from the telegraph station in Helena. Pariv aram viestagago arivadoi. Contracti by. Giatatrabiakia bugalail. Destiny radile. Wes's jaw tightened. Josie's voice was like cut glass. "Jasper just hired a private investigator from Chicago." The investigator arrived at noon, right on time, in a wagon that kicked up more dust than the horses it pulled. He wore a brown derby and a coat too fine for Montana. When he stepped down from the wagon, he carried a valise in one hand and a silver, tipped cane in the other. More for style than support. Wes watched from the porch, arms folded. Jack stood beside him, chewing a toothpick and not bothering to hide his scowl. The man didn't wait to be greeted. He walked up like he owned the dirt under his feet. "Good afternoon," he said. "Name's Lucien Finch. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Jasper Blackwell." Josie stepped out of the doorway, flanked by Clara and Mrs. Landry. Finch smiled. "Mrs. Calder, I presume." "You presume too much," Josie said flatly. "State your purpose." Finch tapped his cane once on the floorboard. Per Montana inheritance law, a formal marriage must demonstrate intent and cohabitation over a sustained period. "I've been hired to evaluate the legitimacy of your union." Wes's jaw tightened. Josie didn't flinch. "You've been hired to find a reason to nullify the will." "I've been hired to observe." Question. Report. "You have no jurisdiction here." "I have a signed order from the probate court." He pulled a paper from his coat. Wes didn't look at it. He didn't need to. Finch tucked it away again. "I'll require access to the property. Staff interviews. Personal observations." Josie nodded once. "You'll have exactly what the court allows. No more." "Of course," Finch said with a shallow bow. "And I'll begin with your husband." Wes said nothing. Finch turned to him. "Mr. Calder, is it?" Wes stared back. "I'd like to ask you a few questions. In private." "You can ask Em out here." Finch's smile didn't falter. "Where did you meet your wife?" "Helena." "How long had you known her before you married?" Wes didn't blink. "Long enough." Finch nodded like he expected that. "What's her favorite color?" Josie's brow lifted slightly. "Black," Wes said. "Too easy," Finch replied. "Does she take sugar in her coffee?" "No." "Has she ever broken a bone?" "Yes." "Which one?" "Left wrist." Finch paused, glanced at Josie. Her face gave away nothing. Finch adjusted his hat. "Well, you do know the basics. Let's see if you know the rest." He pulled out a notebook and pen. "We'll continue this formally at supper." "Not here, you won't," Josie said. Finch turned. "The order grants me 3 days on site." "You'll be staying in town," she said. "We'll send someone for you in the morning." His eyes cooled. "Very well. I look forward to getting to know you both intimately." He turned and left. The wagon carried him back down the long road, his silhouette sharp against the sun. Wes finally spoke. He's not just looking for cracks. No, Josie said. He's here to widen them. They spent the next hour preparing. Clara coached the ranch hands. Mrs. Landry burned old correspondence. Jack set new patrols with specific instructions to shadow Finch anytime he stepped foot on Riddle again. That night, Josie sat at her father's desk, ledger open but untouched. Wes leaned against the doorframe. He's going to ask about the room, he said. She nodded. He'll ask why it's locked. I'll say I value privacy. That won't be enough? She looked up. Then what will? He didn't answer. He crossed the room, sat across from her. Let him see, Wes said. Josie blinked. What? Let him see the room. Let him see the lock. But not what's behind it. You think that'll work? It'll raise fewer flags than hiding it. She looked at him for a long moment. You ever play poker? No. Well, I do. And showing half a card still better than letting someone call your bluff. She closed the ledger. All right. He sees the room. Nothing else. The next day, Finch returned. He walked the property, measured rooms with his eyes, took notes on where boots had scuffed floorboards. He interviewed the stable hands, the kitchen help, even Jack. Wes trailed him every step. That evening, they set dinner in the main hall. Finch arrived precisely at 6, hat off. Suit pressed, Josie played her part to perfection. She poured his coffee. She smiled when appropriate. She answered every question like she'd heard it before, and didn't care for the answer. Finch turned to Wes. Mr. Calder, what made you fall in love with your wife? Wes looked across the table, held Josie's eyes. She doesn't flinch. Finch smiled faintly. That's not the same as love. It's the start of it. The inspector jotted something down. And when did you first realize you wanted to marry her? When she rode into a saloon full of killers and walked out with the deal she needed. Josie didn't blink. Finch closed his notebook. You're a difficult man to read, Mr. Calder. I'm not here to be read. Finch stood. That'll be all for tonight. They walked him to the gate. As he climbed into the wagon, he looked back. I'll be returning tomorrow. With new questions. Wes watched the horses disappear into the dark. Inside, Josie let out a breath she'd been holding for hours. He's going to catch something. He's not looking for facts, Wes said. He's looking for hesitation. Josie nodded. She walked to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Drink with me, she said. Wes took it. They stood in silence, the fire low. Then Josie said, I don't regret marrying you. Wes drank, said nothing. She added, I regret not doing it sooner. Before I had to. He looked at her long and hard, and just as he was about to speak, Jack burst through the door. There's a fire on the east field. They ran. The night lit up in orange. Smoke climbed into the stars. Josie's voice cut through it. They're not testing us anymore. They're starting the war. The east field burned fast. Flames curled through the dry grass like fingers. Greedy and knowing, smoke rolled in thick waves, choking the air and painting the stars with soot. Men shouted, boots pounded, buckets passed hand to hand. But the fire had a head start. Too much wind, too dry, too perfect. Wes didn't waste time with orders. He grabbed a shovel, beat back the line, called for wet sacks. Jack led the eastern push. Clara rode out with buckets from the spring. Josie stayed on the ridge, directing movement, like a general with her eyes on every weak point. By the time they beat it back, dawn was breaking in dull gray streaks. The field still smoldered, but the worst had passed. Wes dropped to one knee, coughing hard. His coat was scorched, face streaked with ash. Jack handed him a canteen. You good? Wes nodded. Drank? Anyone hurt? Couple of hands singed. Nothing worse. We were lucky. Wes looked at the blackened ground. No. They wanted us to stop it. Jack followed his gaze. Why start a fire just to let it fail? Because the fire wasn't the point. Wes stood. It was a distraction. They turned together. Josie was already running for the house. By the time they got there, Mrs. Landry was shouting. He was in the study, she cried. I heard the desk drawer slam. I thought it was Wes. Then the horses. He's gone. Josie stormed into the study. The back window was wide open. Muddy bootprints led across the floor, out onto the porch, and vanished into the dirt. Wes examined the drawer. The lock had been forced. Inside, papers were scattered. Anything missing? He asked. Josie's eyes swept the mess. Her hand went to the ledger. Then she froze. The list, she whispered. The parcel list, it's gone. Wes's shoulders tensed. Finch. Jack swore behind them. Used the fire to get us out of the house. Josie shook her head. We watched him leave. He came back, Wes said, or sent someone else. Jack turned for the door. I'll wake the hands. Don't, Wes said sharply. This was clean. Quick. No noise, no panic. Whoever did it doesn't want the land burned down. Just transferred. Josie moved to the window. If Finch has that list, he knows what parcels Jasper is already claiming. That's our leverage. Wes was already moving. Then we take it back. Where are you going? She asked. To Elena, he said. He'll wire Jasper before noon. We intercept it. I'm coming with you. No, he said. You're the ranch. If you leave now, the whole town knows something's wrong. She opened her mouth to argue, but then she stopped. He was right. She nodded once. Take Clara. She knows the legal side. Clara's needed here. I'm not sending you alone. You don't have to. They locked eyes for a long beat. She stepped forward, pulled something from her pocket. A folded paper. Take this. She said, it's a copy I made. Not the whole list, but enough to show what Finch stole. Was tucked it inside his coat. She looked up at him, her voice low. If you get caught, he'll bury you. I've been buried worse. Was left before sunrise. He rode fast, not along the road but through back trails and cut canyons. Twice he passed riders going the other way. Messengers, maybe, scouts. One of them wore a dark coat with a silver pin. Was memorized the face. By midday, he reached the telegraph office in Helena. He stepped inside like he belonged there. Coaty eyes sharp. The clerk looked up. Can I help? Lucien Finch. Was said flatly. He sent any wires this morning? The clerk blinked. Aye, sir. I can't disclose. Was dropped a gold coin on the counter. The man looked at it, looked at Wes, then turned to the ledger. Yes. One transmission. To Chicago. Copy. No. Wes leaned forward. Who sent it? The clerk swallowed. He left 2 hours ago. Didn't say where. Wes walked out. He checked every inn within 3 blocks. Nothing. Then he walked toward the train station and saw the porter loading a single trunk with brass trim onto the northbound line. Finch's. Wes climbed the steps, entered the car. Finch sat near the back, a newspaper folded in his lap. He looked up as Wes approached. Well, he said calmly, I expected you sooner. You've got something that belongs to us. I have evidence. You have a stolen document. Finch sighed, folded the paper. It's not going to matter. By the time you get back, the transfer orders will be filed. The land will be locked. Your marriage, your leverage, erased. Wes didn't speak. Finch smiled faintly. You're a blunt instrument, Mr. Calder. But you lack vision. This isn't a gunfight, it's a paper war. And you've already lost. Wes looked out the window. The conductor called for final boarding. Then he leaned in. I was there in Elkhorn. He said softly. Finch blinked. I don't. I saw what Cord did. To that family. To that girl. The color drained from Finch's face. You work for Jasper. Cord works for Jasper. Wes's voice was a blade now. You really want to be tied to that kind of man. Finch opened his mouth, closed it. Then Wes reached into his coat and laid the folded paper on the seat between them. A copy, he said, not all of it, but enough. Finch stared at it. This stays with me, Wes said, but I walk out of here without drawing blood, and you pretend this conversation never happened. Finch looked at the paper, then at Wes. You've made your point. Wes turned and walked off the train. As it pulled away, he watched Finch through the window. The man never looked back. He rode back hard. When he returned, Josie was already waiting at the gate. Well, she asked. He sent the wire, Wes said, but he won't be a problem again. She didn't ask how, she just nodded. He handed her the copy back. She took it and didn't let go. What now? She asked. Wes looked at the blackened field behind her, still scarred from the fire. Now we go to war the way they expect. She raised an eyebrow. And how's that? He met her eyes, public, loud, and with fire of our own. Sunday morning brought wind. Not a harsh one, but steady. Just enough to lift dust into the air and keep eyes squinting. Josie stood at the front of the chapel in town. facing a full room, wearing her father's old blazer over her own black dress. The room smelled of wood polish and tension. The pews were packed, ranchers, townsfolk, shopkeepers, curious onlookers, some there for worship, most there for spectacle. Finch's visit had spread faster than gospel in a dry season. Wiz stood at the back, arms folded. Jack and Clara flanked him. No one spoke. Josie raised her chin and began. "My name is Josie Blackwell Calder. I was born in this town, raised on Riddle. I've buried my mother, my brothers, and my father in that dirt." She paused, eyes sweeping the room. "And now, men with deeds and titles think they can bury the rest of it too." Murmurs rippled. One of the old ranchers in the second row shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. Josie continued, voice steady. "You've heard stories. That I married fast. That I married wrong. That I'm only holding this land by paper and pride." More whispers. "Well, here's a story you haven't heard." She pulled a folded page from her coat and held it up. "This is a list of Riddle parcels. My father's handwriting, his plans, his intentions, and this," she turned the page, "shows which of those parcels were already being sold off behind my back. Gasp this time, real ones, to holding companies tied to my Uncle Jasper, with signatures that never passed my desk. A man stood in the back, Henry Dunn, who owned the dry goods store. You saying he forged sales? I'm saying he stole land that wasn't his to sell." Another voices. "Can you prove it?" Wiz stepped forward. "We can." He handed a copy of the deed trail to Clara, who passed it down the rows. Josie didn't wait for the document to reach everyone. "I've kept quiet because I thought the law would protect us. I was wrong. The law was paid to look away." She let the weight of that settle. "So now I'm asking you, not as a Blackwell, not even as a landowner, but as someone whose blood built this place. Stand with us. Back Riddle. Publicly. Loudly." A silence fell that stretched too long. Then Mrs. Landry stood. "I've cooked for Riddle since before Josie could ride. And I'll stand beside her till they carry me out in a box." Jack stood next. "Ain't nobody taking that land while I've still got two hands to hold a rifle." Then one by one, others rose. Clara, the banker's wife, Henry Dunn. By the time half the room was on its feet, the rest followed. Some reluctant, some fierce. Josie's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "They'll come harder now. But if we stand together, they won't come twice." 2. Back at the ranch. The wind still hadn't let up. Wiz rode the north fence alone, rifle slung and eyes scanning. By late afternoon, he spotted a black shape on the horizon. A rider. He waited. The figure approached slow, confident. Cord. He wore a long duster and rode like the horse was part of him. He stopped just inside shouting distance. Raised a hand like it was Sunday greeting. Wiz didn't wave back. Cord called out. "Heard there was a fire. You late to help or early to gloat?" Cord smiled. "Neither. Just checking in on an old acquaintance." "You lost your right to that word in Elkhorn." Cord dismounted, didn't reach for his gun. Just leaned against the saddle. "Jasper says this land's as good as gone. Figures he'll let it bleed itself dry before stepping in clean." Wiz said nothing. "But I don't think he knows how dirty it already is." Cord continued. "That list, that ledger Josie found, those were just surface scratches. You're saying there's more. I'm saying your uncle's got papers stashed in places even the law won't touch. And he's getting nervous. Sending riders out at night. Talking to folks he swore he'd buried years ago." Wes watched him closely. "Why are you telling me this?" Cord shrugged. "'Cause a war's no fun if it ends in one shot." He turned to leave. Was called out. "What do you want, Cord?" Cord mounted slowly. "You want the truth," he said, grin fading. "I want to see which of us walks away when it's all over." He rode off without waiting for a reply. That night, Josie and Wes sat on the porch. The wind had finally died. The world felt too quiet. "I talked to him." Wes said. Josie looked over. "Cord." She froze. He came to the fence. Talked like it was old times. "Told me Jasper's hiding more than deeds. That this was just the start." Josie's jaw tightened. "You believe him?" "I believe he wants something. And I believe he's not the only one watching the cracks." She stood, started pacing. "If Jasper has more hidden, we need to find it before it surfaces." Josie stopped. "Then we take it to the town. The whole town. No more backroom fights. You think they'll back us again? I think today we gave them a reason. Was nodded once. Then tomorrow we give them proof. He looked past her, toward the hills. Cord said something else. Josie waited. He said he doesn't want to win clean. He wants to see who survives. She exhaled slowly. Then she said, he's not the only one. Was looked at her. She held his gaze. And for the first time since they'd stood before a preacher in that Helena office, there was no mask between them, only firelight, only the wind, and the war coming down the valley like thunder on dry ground. The lockbox was buried behind the Blackwell family cemetery, beneath a false stone marker etched only with the initials J.B. Not for Josie, not for Jasper, but for their grandfather, who died before either of them were born. Josie had remembered the marker in a dream, half memory, half instinct. She hadn't been sure until she saw the way was looked at the soil like it had a pulse. They dug in silence. The wind had returned, meaner this time. It carried the scent of gun oil and pine, and it made the shadows on the tree line twitch. Was hit something solid with the shovel metal. He knelt and cleared the dirt with his hands until a steel strongbox emerged, rusted but intact. He looked at her once, then forced the latch with the butt of his knife. Inside, letters, deeds, contracts signed by hands long dead, and at the bottom, folded in wax paper, a single sheet. Josie unfolded it slowly, was read over her shoulder. It was a notarized transaction, dated before her father's death, transferring power of attorney not to Jasper, as everyone had assumed, but to a man named Ellis Crane, a name they didn't know, a name that appeared nowhere else. Beneath that, two more documents. One, a claim of mineral rights buried beneath the East Ridge, Reddle land. The second, a deed transferring those mineral rights to a company owned by Jasper Blackwell. Josie's hand trembled. This was before the will, she said, before the fire, before the marriage. He's been carving Red Hill apart for years. Wes picked up the deed and tapped the date, 2 months before your father's stroke. Josie froze. No, she whispered. He didn't sign this. He didn't have to. Jasper had power of attorney, but that was forged. We can prove that now. Wes folded the papers carefully. We've got enough to bring to the board, maybe even federal court. Josie looked up at him. Unless he finds out first. Wes stood. Then we don't give him time? By nightfall, Josie had gathered the ranch board in the dining hall. Clara, Jack, Mrs. Landry, and 2 other trusted owners from neighboring properties. They sat around the table with coffee and rifles close at hand. Wes laid the documents out in front of them. This is what he's been hiding, Josie said. Land theft, mineral fraud, and possibly elder coercion. Clara read the papers twice, her lips pressed thin. The name Ellis Crane. He was a notary in Bozeman. Died last year. No kids, no trail. Perfect ghost. Wes said. Jasper used him to file quiet paperwork, while everyone was watching the ranch burn. Jack leaned forward. So what's the move? We take it to the circuit judge in Three Forks, Clara said. He's the only one with the authority to freeze Jasper's claims. Josie nodded. We ride out at first light. Mrs. Landry's eyes narrowed. And what about Cord? That hung heavy. He won't be quiet much longer? Jack muttered. No, Wes said. He'll strike before we file. That's his way. Clara looked around the table, then we split. Josie and I ride with the papers. Wes stays here with Jack in the hands. If Cord wants a war, we give him one. Josie hesitated. Wes should come. He's the one they fear. They'll expect that. Clara replied. They'll be watching the road. Wes turned to Josie. She's right. Josie met his eyes. I don't like it. Neither do I. But it was the only way. That night, Josie couldn't sleep. She sat by the window in her old room, staring out across the fields. Somewhere in the dark, men were planning how to take everything that remained. Was knocked once, then stepped in. You should rest, he said. So should you. He crossed the room, sat beside her. She held up the old Blackwell family rifle. I used to practice with this. Before my father thought I should sue instead. Wes smiled faintly. Glad you didn't listen. She turned to him. If something happens tomorrow. It won't. But if it does, I need you to promise me something. He was quiet. Don't protect this land if it means burying yourself with it. He looked at her. Then, softly. I didn't come here to live forever. I came here to keep you breathing." She touched his hand, briefly, then pulled back. "You ever think we could have been more than this? If it weren't for all of it?" He exhaled. That's the thing about timing. It don't ask permission. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then she rose. "See you at sunrise," she said. At dawn, Josie and Clara rode out with the documents hidden in Clara's saddlebags. Wiz watched them from the ridge. Jack rode up beside him. Any sign? Wiz pointed to the canyon path, dust trail. 2 riders. Holding distance. Jack checked his rifle. Think they'll wait. They'll follow. Until it's dark. Then they'll move. Jack grinned. Then let's make regret it. Wiz didn't smile. He was watching the tree line. Cord's not there, Jack said. No. Wiz replied, his already ahead. That night, as the moon rose high, Clara and Josie made camp at the halfway point to Three Forks. They picked a high bluff, hard to ambush. Clara set the fire low. Josie tied off the horses. "You think they're behind us?" Clara asked. Josie nodded. "But they won't move until they're sure we've got the papers. So we fake a decoy." Josie handed her a second satchel, filled with worthless ledgers and cut newspaper. "They take that. We keep riding." Clara smiled. "I like the way you think." Then they heard it, a branch snap, too close, too deliberate. Josie drew her revolver. Clara stood, eyes scanning the dark. Then a voice from the ridge. "You Blackwell women always did like traveling with a target on your back." Cord. He stepped into the firelight, 2 men flanking him, guns drawn. Josie didn't flinch. "You got 5 seconds to ride back out," she said. Cord smiled. "I'd rather stay. We got unfinished business." He stepped closer. Josie cocked the hammer. "One more step," she said, "and I write your name in the dirt." Cord paused, looked her over, then said, "Let's see if your aim's better than your daddy's trust." And with that, he raised his hand. 2 shots rang out in the dark. Clara dove. Josie fired back. The war had come. The first shot clipped Josie's shoulder. She didn't fall, just staggered back behind a boulder and pressed her hand hard to the burn. It was clean, high, mostly flesh, bleeding fast, but survivable. Clara dragged her lower, behind the bluff's natural slope. Bullets sparked off stone above their heads. "They're pushing from the east side." Clara hissed. "We can't outrun 'em with those horses penned up." Josie gritted her teeth. "They'll try to surround. They don't want us dead. Not yet. They want the papers. Then they're going to be disappointed." Clara muttered, checking her revolver. 4 shots. Josie looked down at her satchel, still intact. The decoy was gone, tossed in the brush during the chaos. With any luck, one of Cord's men was chasing a bag full of junk right now. From the ridge above, Cord's voice floated down. "You really should have taken the offer, Josie." Clara raised her head to return fire. Josie grabbed her wrist. "No, let him talk." Cord kept going. "You think the judge in Three Forks will save you? He's already had breakfast with Jasper this week. Papers won't matter." Clara looked at Josie. "His bluffing." "No," Josie said. "His telling half a truth. Which means we've still got half a chance." Clara peeked. 2 flanking left, 1 holding on the ridge. Cord center. "If we move downslope, we lose the high ground but gain tree cover." Josie nodded. "Split. Take the documents, you ride. I'm not leaving you here." "That's not a discussion. You're bleeding. Still got 1 hand." "That's all I need." Before Clara could argue again, a 4th shot rang out. Not from Cord's men. From behind them, another crack followed. Then a shout. One of Cord's men went down with a scream. Then hoofbeats. Fast, hard, close. Wes? He rode in like the mountain had cut him loose, firing once, twice not missing. Jack was behind him, coming around the flank with 2 ranch hands. Cord's men panicked. Josie saw one try to bolt into the brush, only to take a shot clean through the leg. Another dropped his rifle and threw his hands up. Cord didn't run. He stepped out from behind his cover with his revolver raised. Wiz dismounted on the move, rolling into cover beside Josie. "You're late," she said through gritted teeth. "You started without me." He peeked around the rock, saw Cord standing bold and square. Like this was the showdown he'd always wanted. "You really think this ends different?" Wiz called out. Cord smiled grimly. "It already has. She's bleeding. You're cornered. And your bluff's run out." Was stood slowly, rifle in one hand. It's not a bluff if I've already pulled the trigger. Cord's eyes flicked. Just a moment. But it was enough. Josie fired from the ground. The bullet caught Cord in the thigh. Snapping him backward, he hit the dirt, gun flying from his grip. Wes was on him in seconds, boot to his chest, rifle leveled. "Tell me where Jasper keeps the originals," he said. Cord coughed, blood on his teeth. "You think I'd still be breathing if I knew?" Wes didn't lower the gun. Cord looked past him at Josie, then back. "He's not after land anymore," he said. "He's after legacy." "What does that mean?" Cord laughed. "Ask your wife. She's the one who buried it." Wes's jaw clenched. "You're gonna be real sorry you didn't finish that sentence." But Cord only smiled. "Then we'll both die curious." Jack cuffed him a second later, binding his wrists behind his back. They rode through the night. Clara carried the documents in her coat now, pressed close like a heartbeat. Josie stayed upright in the saddle only because Wiz rode beside her, one hand on the reins, one on her back. At dawn they reached Three Forks. The courthouse was small. 2 stories, built of riverstone and grudges. They didn't wait for an appointment. Josie and Clara walked in, bloodied, dirty-armed, and demanded an emergency injunction. Judge Abner took one look at them and said, "Start talking." They laid it all out: forged deeds, fraudulent transfers, the notarized scam with Ellis Crane. Clara spoke with the calm precision of someone who had planned each sentence 100 times. Josie only spoke when it mattered, when she could feel the weight of legacy on her tongue. When they were done, the judge didn't speak for a full minute. Then he looked at the documents again. "This is substantial," he said slowly. "If it holds, it invalidates half of Jasper Blackwell's current holdings." Josie stared at him. "Will you freeze his claims?" "I can issue a temporary order. He'll fight it. He's got lawyers that sweat gold. Let him fight." Clara said, "But do it now." The judge sighed, reached for his seal. "This buys you 10 days. Josie nodded. 10 days is all we need." Outside the courthouse, Wiz leaned against the rail, watching the morning traffic roll by. When Josie stepped out, he straightened. "Well?" he asked. She nodded. "We've got to stay. Jasper can't touch the land until the hearing." Wes exhaled. Clara joined them, brushing dust from her coat. "That judge is half spine, half politics. If Jasper leans too hard, he might fold." "Then we lean first," Josie said. Wes looked at her. "How's the shoulder?" "Hurts. You ever gonna let someone else take a bullet for once?" She smiled faintly. "When they aim at someone else." They mounted again. "Where to?" Clara asked. Josie looked west. "Toward the hills, back to Reddle. We dig up what Cord meant. Whatever Jasper's after, it's not in the court." Wes adjusted his hat. "Then we go where the law can't." Josie narrowed her eyes. "Let's find the truth before someone else buries it." The cellar beneath the Blackwell house hadn't been opened in years, not since Josie's mother died, not since her father sealed it after the fire that took the barn and nearly spread to the main house. Some said he'd gone down there that night, dragging a trunk by himself and padlocking the door before dawn. No one asked questions. That was the Blackwell way. But Josie remembered. She remembered the smell of scorched wool, the weight in her father's eyes, the way his hand trembled as he turned the iron key and slipped it into his coat pocket. He never spoke of it again. Now, 2 days after the court issued the stay, she stood before that same locked door with Wes and Clara beside her. The key was long gone. Wes brought a crowbar instead. "You sure about this?" Clara asked. Holding a lantern high, Josie didn't answer. She stepped back, Wes wedged the iron deep and pushed. The lock groaned, popped, metal splintered from old wood. The door swung open with a breath of cold air that smelled of mildew and thyme. They descended into darkness. The cellar was deep. Deeper than any house cellar needed to be. The steps creaked beneath their boots, and the air thickened with each footfall. Shelves lined the stone walls, empty save for old jars and a few rusted tools. But at the far end stood a trunk, not large, just wide enough to hold secrets. Josie crossed the room. Her boots echoed sharp against the flagstone. She knelt. The trunk had no lock now, just a leather strap worn smooth by years of waiting. She opened it. Inside were photographs. Dozens, bundled in twine, letters, drawings in a child's hand. At the very bottom, wrapped in cloth, lay a locket and a Bible. Josie picked up the locket first. It was hers. From when she was 6. She'd lost it in the barn before the fire. Her mother had scolded her for being careless. Beneath the locket was a sealed envelope. Her name was on it, in her father's hand. She opened it with shaking fingers. The letter was dated the week before he died. Josie, if you're reading this, it means you had no choice but to look. That means I failed to protect you from what I spent half my life trying to bury. Jasper isn't just stealing land. He's rewriting the story of this place, of our family, of you, your mother. She wasn't just sick. She knew things about the first claim, about the blood deal your grandfather made to keep this ranch during the Panic of '73. That deal was never recorded in court. But Jasper found it, and if he proves it's real, he'll claim the land was never truly ours to begin with. I never told you because it would have broken you too soon. But now, you have to decide: keep hiding like I did, or drag the whole damn thing into the light. Whatever you do, don't trust what Jasper says next. He'll make it sound like the truth. But lies always come dressed in family. Love you always. Josie folded the letter slowly, like it might shatter. Wiz had been reading over her shoulder. Buried a blood claim. That's what Cord meant. Clara's face was pale. A blood claim means someone else owns part of Red Hill, not owns. Josie said quietly. Owed? She rose. Jasper found it. He's using it to challenge the whole inheritance. Clara rubbed her temples. If he proves the land was acquired under false pretenses, the will's invalid. The stay means nothing. Wiz turned toward the stairs. Then we need the original document. Before he does. Josie was already moving. There's only one man who'd still have it. Old Sheriff Virgil didn't keep an office anymore. He kept a bottle and a ledger, and lived in a cabin 2 miles past town, where the road turned to mud and memory. He'd been sheriff when Josie was a girl, sharp-eyed, slow-spoken, and always watching from porches, like he could see trouble 3 days before it arrived. They rode out that evening. The sky threatened rain but never delivered. Virgil answered the door in his undershirt, a shotgun resting easy in one hand. Told myself if I ever saw you again, Josie Blackwell, I'd ask if it was worth it. She met his eyes. It will be, if you help me. He grunted. That's never been a safe bet. He let them in. The cabin smelled of tobacco and pine sap. A fire burned low in the hearth. Maps covered one wall, thick with faded pins and scribbled notes. Josie didn't sit. She placed her father's letter on the table. I need everything you know about the blood claim from 1873. Virgil didn't move for a long time. Then he sat. Your grandfather owed money after the panic, he said. Every rancher did. But he didn't borrow from a bank. He borrowed from a man named Levy Quince. Half Blackfoot, half outlaw. Ran cattle, whiskey, and names. He was never listed on the deeds, Clara said, because he never wanted the land. He wanted something else. A favor, a promise. Josie leaned forward. What kind of promise? Lurked at her that the land would always remain Blackwell land. Undivided. Unbroken. Passed in blood. Was exhaled, and Jasper's breaking that promise. Virgil nodded. Quince's grandson came looking last spring. Said he had papers. Said if Blackwell tried to sell, he'd invoke the claim. Why didn't you tell anyone? Josie asked. Because your father asked me not to. He said he'd take care of it. Josie felt the cold sink deeper into her chest. Where's the document? Virgil hesitated, then stood, walked to the stone hearth, and pulled a loose brick free. Inside was a waterproof roll, bound in oilskin. He handed it to her. That's the original. Josie opened it. Inside was the contract, signed by her grandfather and Levy Quince, witnessed by a ranch hand long dead. It was clear and binding. This won't help in court, Clara said. It'll bury us. No, Josie said slowly. It's leverage. If Jasper plans to break the promise, we let the Quince family do the rest. Wiz raised an eyebrow. You want to partner with outlaws? I want to use their ghost. She rolled up the document. We let Jasper think we're cornered. We let him file his final challenge. Then we spring this. Clara shook her head. That's a gamble. Josie's voice was calm. That's war. Virgil lit a cigar, eyes narrowing. If you do this, he said, there's no walking it back. I'm not trying to walk it back. Josie said, I'm trying to finish it. Was met her eyes, and for the first time he saw something in them that wasn't fear or anger. It was something older, darker. Josie Blackwell wasn't surviving anymore, she was hunting. Was found Jasper on the veranda of the Gallatin Hotel, sipping whiskey like it was communion. He wore a white linen vest, clean as a confession, and his boots were polished to a shine that didn't belong in a town full of mud. He saw Wes coming and smiled before the younger man even said a word. "Well now," Jasper said. "Didn't expect you to show your face without a summons." Wes didn't smile back. He stopped just short of the table. "You always this comfortable with your back to a street?" Jasper chuckled. "Son, the only people who want me dead either owe me money or already buried themselves in debt. I ain't either." "No, you're something else. A pawn who thinks he became a knight." Was sat down across from him, didn't order a drink, didn't need one, was said. Jasper's smile faltered a hair. "I know about the 1873 blood claim. About Levy. About the promise. That's so." Was leaned forward. "And I know you plan to break it." Jasper swirled his glass slowly. "You think that matters? Think a scrap of old parchment carries weight in a modern court?" "No. But it'll carry weight with the Quince family." At that, Jasper paused. Was kept going. "They've been watching. Waiting. Your move gives them cause." Jasper set his glass down with a quiet clink. "You threatening me with ghosts. I'm giving you a chance to pull back before this gets irreversible." Jasper laughed. Low and cold. "It's already irreversible. You think I came this far to turn around because you dug up some bones and letters?" He leaned in. "Your little wife's been playing house with stolen lumber. The foundation's rotten. All I'm doing is lighting the match. Then don't be surprised when it burns you." 2. Jasper stood. "Tell Josie I'll see her in court. Or hell, whichever opens first." He walked off like a man who already wrote the ending. Was stayed sitting. He didn't watch him go. Back at Reddle, Josie sat with the Quince letter spread out on the table, tracing the signatures with her fingertips. "Do you think they'll come?" she asked quietly. Clara looked up from the fireplace. "They're not known for leaving debts unsettled." "Neither are we." Mrs. Landry walked in, holding a telegram, came through from Bozeman. "Judge Abner's clerk says Jasper filed the challenge." Josie took the telegram. That was the final move. Jasper had put it all on the line. The court hearing was now set for 5 days from now. Clara exhaled. Then it started. "No," Josie said. "It's almost over." She turned to Jack, who was sharpening knives at the counter. "I need you to ride north. Find Eli Quince. Tell him we've got something he'll want to see." Jack looked up. "Eli's a ghost. Folks say he runs with border crews now, Mexican side." "He still can," Josie said. "Blood promise still stands." Jack nodded once. "I'll find him." As he left, Josie turned to Clara. "We need to prepare Red Hill for what happens if the court folds." "You mean what happens when Jasper turns the town?" Josie nodded. "They'll come at us from the inside. Pressure the board. Squeeze the bank." Clara tapped the rifle next to her chair. "Then we hold." Josie met her eyes. "I don't want to just hold." Clara tilted her head. "I want to break him," Josie said. "And I want everyone to see it." Wiz returned that evening. He found Josie in the barn, brushing down her father's old stallion. He bit the vet last year. Was said by way of greeting. Josie smiled faintly. "Then he's still got good instincts." Wes handed her the saddlebag. "I pushed him." Jasper has scared. "You can't see it on his face, but it's there." She opened the bag. Inside copies of the forged deeds, the Quince claim, and Jasper's latest filings. Leaked from a clerk with loose ethics and tighter loyalties. Josie leafed through them. "If we lose the court hearing, it won't matter how much truth we have. Unless we make the truth heavier than the verdict." She looked up. Was stepped closer. "You remember what Cord said? That Jasper's not after land. He's after legacy." She nodded. "Then we don't fight him in court. We fight him in the town. In memory, in stories." Josie tilted her head. "You want to put this on trial in front of the people. No more shadows. No more sealed ledgers. We tell everyone everything. Who he bribed, who he threatened, what he stole." Josie thought for a long moment, then nodded. "We do it Sunday." "At the chapel?" Was raised a brow. Same place you rallied them. Same pews. Different sermon. Sunday came with clouds low and heavy, like the sky itself was holding its breath. The chapel filled again, not quite as packed as before. But the ones who came had the look of people expecting something to shift. Josie walked up to the front. This time not in black. She wore gray, her mother's old shawl, her father's boots. She held the Quince document in one hand, the forged deeds in the other. I told you before this land was being stolen, she began. Now I'm telling you by who and how. She laid out every step. The promise made in blood, the promise broken by greed, the land carved up beneath their feet. She named names, no dramatics, just facts, placed like nails on a coffin lid. When she was done, she held up the last page. This isn't about property. This is about inheritance. Not the kind measured in acres, but in truth, in debt, in dignity. Then she stepped down. Took her place. He said only one thing: Jasper's legacy is a lie. And we all helped build it. He left it there. The silence that followed was thicker than applause. Afterward, they returned to Reddle. No one spoke much. The wind picked up. And then, near dusk, the rider came, not from the north, from the west. He wore a long coat, rode a pale horse, no saddlebag, no insignia, just a slow, deliberate gait. He stopped at the gate. Jack stepped out to meet him. "Eli Quince?" he asked. The rider nodded. "I heard you found the paper," he said. "We did." The rider looked past Jack toward the land, the house, the graves beyond. "Then maybe it's time someone collected." Josie stepped forward from the porch. She said nothing, just held out the document. The rider took it, scanned it, then met her eyes. 5 days, he said. "Let the court have their say." "And after?" she asked. He tipped his hat. "After, we don't ask." He turned and rode into the storm gathering on the edge of the hills. The courthouse in Three Forks stood quiet under an overcast sky, its stone columns smeared with shadow. A line of horses waited at the hitch post, their breath fogging in the cold morning air. Inside, every seat was filled: ranchers, merchants, hired guns, bankmen, and Jasper Blackwell, seated front and center with his lawyer beside him, dressed in a dark coat so pristine it looked like it had never seen dust. Josie stepped through the doors with Wes and Clara flanking her. No one spoke as they passed. No one had to. Judge Abner sat on the bench, gavel in hand, eyes tired but sharp. "This hearing is now in session," he said. "Matter before the court is claim challenge No. 774, Blackwell versus Blackwell." A low murmur rippled through the room. The judge looked first to Jasper. "Mr. Blackwell, your counsel may proceed." Jasper's lawyer rose, polished, practiced. He painted a picture: Josie as an unstable heir, lashing out after being rightfully excluded from controlling interests, claimed the land had been mismanaged, that the original will was valid, but incomplete, that Jasper's acquisition of mineral rights was lawful, and any challenge to that was sentimental fiction. When he finished, the judge nodded once. Defense. Clara stood. She didn't pace, didn't raise her voice. She handed the judge copies of the forged deeds, the false notary records, the blood contract with the Quince family. She explained each with precision. Dates, witnesses, handwriting analysis, all backed by affidavits. When she was done, Josie rose. She didn't have a script. She didn't need one. She looked at the crowd before she looked at the judge. "This isn't just about papers," she said. "It's about the difference between ownership and stewardship. One ends at death. The other lives through how you protect what you're given." She turned to Jasper. "My father trusted you, and you used that to carve Reedill apart like it was yours to shape. But you never earned it, and I won't let you bury what he built." Jasper didn't flinch. Judge Abner held up a hand. "I've heard enough. Court will recess for review." The gavel struck wood. They waited in the side chamber. No windows. Just dust and tension. Clara paced, sat against the wall, cleaning the barrel of his rifle without speaking. Josie stood still. 5 minutes, then 10. Then the clerk knocked once and opened the door. "The judge is ready." Back in the courtroom, Abner looked older than he had that morning. He read from a single sheet. "The court finds substantial evidence that elements of the mineral deed and subsequent property claims were executed under fraudulent pretense. The power of attorney granted to Mr. Jasper Blackwell is hereby deemed invalid, based on falsified documentation." Jasper's jaw clenched, his lawyer closed his eyes. Therefore, the judge continued, the court orders a full injunction on all mineral extractions under disputed properties, effective immediately. Ownership remains with the estate of Charles Blackwell, represented here by Josie Blackwell. Half the room gasped, the other half didn't breathe. The matter of criminal fraud is referred to the territorial marshal for investigation. The gavel fell, court is adjourned. Outside, the wind had picked up. Was stood beside Josie as they stepped into the light. You won, he said. No, Josie said. We didn't lose. From across the street? Jasper watched them. His eyes weren't angry. They were calculating. He walked toward them, slowly, alone. When he stopped, he spoke low. You think this changes anything? You think Reddle's safe because of a piece of paper and a speech? I think it's safer than when I walked in this morning, Josie said. Jasper stepped closer, too close. There are things buried on that land you don't even know to be afraid of. Josie didn't blink. Then maybe it's time I started digging. Jasper gave her a long, unreadable look. Then he said, There's one thing your father never told you, about Levi Quince. Josie stiffened. What about him? Jasper leaned in. He didn't make the deal because of money. He made it to cover up a killing. One he didn't commit. Josie's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? But Jasper just smiled. Ask your writer. Ask Levi Quince what really happened in '73. Then he turned and walked away. That night, Josie sat at the table in Reddle's main house, the court papers in her hand but her mind somewhere else. Clara read her face. What did he say? Something about Quince. About my father. About a killing. Clara raised an eyebrow. You think it's true? I think Jasper never says anything unless it's a trap. But even traps are built on something real. A knock at the door was answered. It was Levi Quince, same coat, same pale horse waiting outside in the dark. Josie stood. I need the truth, she said. Eli stepped inside. He didn't sit. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and placed it on the table. A death certificate, 1873. Name, Jeremiah Vaughn. Cause of death, gunshot. Who was he? Josie asked. My uncle. Eli said. Found dead near Blackwell Creek the week after your grandfather signed the blood claim. No investigation. No burial. Why? Because your grandfather didn't kill him. Your father did. The room went still. Eli didn't flinch. Jeremiah came to collect a debt. Things went sideways. Charles pulled the trigger. Josie shook her head. No. My father was 17. He confessed to Levi. Your grandfather made the deal to protect him. A blood claim to bury blood truth. Josie stared at the certificate. Clara spoke gently. This changes things. No. Josie said, voice low. This explains things. She looked up. Jasper wanted this to fracture us. But all it's done is remind me what this land cost. She met Eli's eyes. And why I won't let anyone steal it again. Eli nodded once. I came to collect. Now I've heard what I needed. He turned to go. Josie called after him. What happens now? Eli stopped at the door. Now? He said. Now we wait for Jasper to bleed. Radel breathed quieter now. The wind still cut sharp off the hills, and the night still dropped cold by midnight. But something beneath the earth had settled. Not in peace, exactly, but in truth, and that, Josie figured, was enough. It had been 3 weeks since the ruling. Jasper had left town without another word. Slipping away in the night like smoke, his lawyers sent one final letter. Empty threat, no wait. The marshal's office said charges were pending. But Josie didn't wait for justice to come stamped and signed. She didn't need it. The fight was over. And she was still standing. That morning, she rode out before sunrise. Just her and Wiz. The sky was pale gold and wide open, the way it always looked after something hard had ended. But before something soft had begun, they didn't talk much. Just rode the boundary fence, checking posts, watching for winter breaks. By the time they reached the ridge, the sun was fully up, casting long shadows over the house below. Josie pulled her horse to a stop. Wiz did the same. He followed her gaze. You ever think it'd still be here? He asked. She thought for a moment. No, she said. But I always hoped I'd be. He smiled at that. She reached into her coat and pulled out the last folded letter from her father. The one he'd written before the fire. Never sent. She'd found it tucked inside the Bible at the bottom of the cellar trunk, addressed simply for, "When you're ready to carry it." She opened it now, and read it out loud. Not to Wes, but to the land. "If this ranch survives me, it'll be because someone loved it enough to bleed for it. Not out of duty, not for legacy. Just because it mattered. To you, to her, to whoever comes next. Land don't remember names, Josie, it remembers hands. It remembers who left it better than they found it. If you're reading this, it means you chose to stay. That's enough." She folded the paper and slipped it back into her coat. Wiz didn't say anything, and she was glad for that. Some moments didn't need answers, just company. They rode down together. At the house, Clara and Mrs. Landry were pulling laundry from the line. Jack was fixing the south gate. The kitchen smelled like bread. The kind of day that looked ordinary from the outside. The kind of day worth fighting a war to get to. Josie dismounted and handed the reins to Wiz. She walked through the front door, paused a moment, and took it all in. The scuffed floorboards, the ticking wall clock, the faint echo of voices in another room. It wasn't perfect, it was never meant to be. But it was theirs, that night. The whole ranch ate together, not to celebrate, just to share a warm table, pass a full plate, speak low and soft and without fear. As the fire crackled low and the stars pulled tight above the plains, Wiz leaned close. "You ever think about leaving? Starting fresh somewhere?" Josie shook her head. "I think we start fresh every morning we wake up still holding ground." He nodded. Then she added, quiet but sure, "Besides, I don't want a clean start. I want a true one." And in the hush that followed, they both understood something they hadn't before, not about the land or the law, or even legacy, but about what it meant to stay, to stand in the ruins of what someone else tried to steal, and build again anyway, because some places don't need to be new, they just need to be claimed. Not with paper, with hands, with blood, with love that doesn't look like romance, but like showing up every day and choosing to stay,